Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast, The Joyful Frugalista, and now here's your host, Serina Bird.
Hello, I'm super excited to share the good news that I have written another book, How to Pay Your Mortgage Off in 10 Years, responds to the cost of living crisis that many people find themselves in. Whether you are paying off a mortgage, you've paid off a mortgage, you aspire to buy a house and have a mortgage, or you know someone who does have a mortgage, this book will have lots of frugal tips and tricks as well as some finance hacks for you. Thank you so much. You my frugalistas, and welcome. Today I have a special guest, and of course all of my guests are special. Today we're going to talk about something that you probably would never expect that I was going to talk about on a podcast, and that is hunting. Yes. That's right, hunting. But first, I have a favour to ask of you. If you enjoyed this podcast and find it useful for you, please pay it forward by sharing with a friend. And even better, please follow this podcast, The Joyful Frugalista. I really love comments as well. So my guest today is someone who I met at networking several years ago, but she recognised me and I didn't remember her, but she's not offended by that, thankfully. She's laughing. She's changed appearance a little bit since then, and that probably sounds very intriguing, but I'll just leave it there. After an almost 30-year career in the military, Phoebe Youd still finds herself drawn to historically male-dominated activities through curiosity and a passion for learning. Since 2022, she has gone from reconnecting with a childhood passion to working in the industry, a hunter, to a branch president of the ACT and Snowy Mountains branch of the Australian Deer Association, and from a wood chopping spectator to a wood chopping competitor. Wow, that's quite a lot.
Yeah, a lot. And all in the last 3 years.
When did you get out of the military?
July 22.
July 22. Since then, you've discovered wood chopping and you've discovered hunting.
Yes. Well, hunting, I discovered that. I was a spectator of that back in 2010, 2011. My husband reconnected with a childhood passion of his, which was shooting. And it went along the lines of, if you don't get yourself a hobby, we're getting divorced.
Right. So he needed a hobby pretty quick.
Yeah, well, it had been 6 months. So my husband is from a wood chopping family. So he's a third generation axeman. And when we moved from Sydney to Wagga, he was competing in wood chopping at the time. And unfortunately, the club that was near him was in the process of folding. So he gave away the wood chopping and for 6 months drove me crazy until I gave him the ultimatum. And next thing I know, there's guns being purchased or firearms being purchased and all sorts of stuff. And that's when the hunting became part of our family fabric.
Wow. So suddenly he's buying firearms. Were you concerned?
Yes. Yes, I was. The closest I'd ever been to a firearm prior to joining the military was the odd occasion where my father would get his firearm out. So 95% of the time this firearm was locked away, and I really didn't get to handle it. I had no exposure to it before I joined the military. All of the exposure I had to firearms upon joining the military was for obvious purposes, such as military training. And then to have it in my own home, that was a very interesting conversation. There were a lot of curiosity-based questions about where are you going to keep it? Is it going to be in the house? Where are you going to? Where does this get stored? Where does that get stored? So I was concerned. I wasn't a fan to start with.
I can imagine. I'm not sure how I would feel either, but my husband Neil spent a lot of time in the country and on the land, I guess. He used to have a sheep farm, and it is a bit different when you are in a rural setting.
Yeah, it really is. The true introduction to hunting and seeing what it was all about came about late 2015. And we had been members of the Australian Deer Association for a number of years by this stage, and we had a family membership, which meant that all of us could go to any of the events that were held at the local branch. And I decided to join in on one of the activities that they had organised over the course of a weekend. And as a result of that weekend, I earned enough points to apply to participate in the hunting program in 2016.
Does that mean you were a good shot?
No, not necessarily. However, yes, I can shoot.
Well, I was guessing that was probably the case, given that's an interest. So let's talk about hunting deer. So I was really surprised. I had heard that there was a big deer problem, particularly in the Snowies, but it wasn't really till we had a late night trip back from Gippsland, where we were attending my uncle's funeral, across the Cairn River, up into Bombala and Cooma and then back, that I really realised the scale of the issue. There were so many deers we saw on that trip, both live and as roadkill, and yes. I was really surprised. How much of a problem is the deer population in the Snowies?
They are a huge problem. Like any feral animal, if they're not controlled to some degree, then they can breed prolifically. So as an example, in terms of how deer numbers can increase if they're not managed, a doe will cycle until she is pregnant. So pretty much that's the life of a doe, breeding and raising fawns.
So how many does would a fawn produce over her lifetime?
How many fawns would a doe produce?
The other way around. Sorry, you know what I meant.
For however long she is alive. So a doe will start breeding from around the age of 2 years. And so if, as an example, if she reaches the ripe old age of 10, she would have had 8 fawns herself. So if you imagine that 100 does in 12 months, double that. Every 12 months.
Wow. And the conditions are good for them there? There's not many natural predators?
There are some. So wild dogs will have a go. Wild dogs, foxes, they're probably the two. They'll seek out the food wherever it is. When you take into consideration that there are 6 species of deer in Australia, that's a lot of numbers. So.
Yeah, it is. And you don't often think of feral deer. Like you might think of rabbits, you might think of too many kangaroos, you might think of brumbies, but not necessarily deer.
Yeah. There are a lot of people that I've met more recently at the National Multicultural Festival who were surprised to hear that we had deer in Canberra, let alone in Australia.
Wow. And actually, let's talk about that, because our mutual friend Elias,
yes,
who introduced me to you and said that I should have you on my podcast, this year he did something really quite amazing, which is during the National Multicultural Festival, where there's lots of stalls with different ethnic groups selling food. He had a stall. Or you all had a stall.
We did. He brought the idea to the executive last year and suggested that we run a venison stall. I assumed the role of president mid last year, and my focus for this year was on venison diplomacy.
Venison diplomacy?
Yes. So it's where we're sharing the fruits of our labour in terms of knowledge with other people who otherwise wouldn't have anything to do with it.
So what's venison like as a food source, as a form of protein, I guess? It's very popular in Europe, I believe.
It is. It's exceptionally popular in Europe. Hunting game is more socially acceptable over there, and I think that's a huge contributing factor. Whereas here, it's not so much. Venison as a food source, it is one of the best proteins that you can actually put into your body. It has a higher iron and the lowest fat content of any red meat that you will ever find.
Any red meat, like even more so than, say, kangaroo or anything else?
Yep.
Wow. And so how do you prepare venison?
Oh, look.
I can see your eyes lighting up. Oh, yummy, yummy, yummy venison.
There are many ways to enjoy venison. If you want to try, look, backstraps are one of our favourites. It's very similar to veal backstraps, any other backstrap that you would find in any other cut of meat. It's very soft, and when cooked correctly, the only way to describe it is meat marshmallow.
Yum. Well, actually, there's probably vegetarians listening to this. My apologies, but this is ethical. We'll get to the ethics in a minute, but at the moment we're still talking food.
We actually had a couple of conservation students visit us at the NMF, and they were both vegetarian. However, they bought a burger and enjoyed it.
Converting the vegetarians, but they understand working in conservation how much of a problem the deers are.
Yeah, absolutely. Their feedback was very supportive. They said that they were really pleased to see what we were doing for the environment and that we were actually using what we were harvesting, which is a big thing for my husband and I.
So. Yeah, I can imagine it. I always sort of feel a bit sad in a way that when you see rabbits, which obviously that's another huge feral animal population, and there's huge problems even around Parliament House, Australian Parliament House and Old Parliament House.
Definitely.
And that's a real issue that needs to be controlled. And other animals that they just get poisoned or they just get shot and just carcasses left to die. It just seems very sad, a real shame.
It's wasteful, yeah. But to get back to how you cook venison.
Yes, the important bit. You can swap beef for venison. So you could make a venison spaghetti bolognese?
Absolutely. It makes the best stag bowl ever.
And sausages? I've seen, were you selling sausages at the National Multicultural Festival?
Yes, we were. However, the venison that we were selling at NMF, we had to buy in through an abattoir because we're not permitted to sell any of our harvest. However, we try to use as much of the animal as what we can. And it's not just for us, it's for our animals as well. So our animals receive any bones or any trimmings off the animal that we can't eat. And we do a lot of mincing and we make our own sausages. How do we do that? We have a lot of equipment at home. So getting set up, yes, the initial outlay, some people may view as expensive. However, we've got a mincer that we've had for something like 3 or 4 years and it's still going strong. We've put hundreds of deer through it.
Do you have kind of venison batch cooking sessions where you all get together and make sausages and things?
Yes, absolutely, yes. When we have a harvest, yes, that's what we do. So we take the animal home and we then let it hang for 1 to 2 days and then we'll break it all up, break it down.
Do you do the butchering yourself? Are there specialists within the club or you've learned how to do this?
No, we've so it's really interesting the different walks of life that are within the club. So where we have members who have those skills, we definitely try to tap into them and ask them if they're happy to come along and show us some hot tips on how to do things. A lot of the stuff that my husband and I do, some of it we've taught ourselves, and every day you teach yourself, you learn something new. Yeah, we're even down to the point where we can do spare ribs and stuff like that now, whereas in the early days we didn't. We painstakingly trimmed all the meat off those and stuff like that, but a little bit more efficient these days.
You're getting new techniques.
Absolutely. Yeah, all the time. Yeah. We now own a sous vide. That's probably my favourite way to do backstrap now, is use a sous vide to cook it. So it's where, do you know where that is?
It's in the plastic bag.
Yeah, so it's vac packed and cooked in a water bath. The beautiful thing about that is that you can set the temperature and just let it cook. It will not overcook because it's low and slow. When we bring it out of the water bath, there's the gorgeous juices in there, so we don't waste those. We make gravy out of that and pop the backstraps on the Weber, brown it up on the outside, and then slice it like, fancy like the chefs do on TV. And
I'm imagining that as you speak.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And the mince is great. Our children actually know when I've used beef in spaghetti bolognese versus venison. So
now, obviously you can't sell it, but
no.
Is it safe for you to eat? Like, I'm assuming so, because you're making sausages and backstrap and ribs and spag bowl from it. You haven't had any health or safety issues?
No, not at all. It's I don't like the word common sense. However, if you're a little bit of education goes a long, long way. So, keep it refrigerated. Make sure it's clean. Like, obviously you wouldn't drag it through dirt and stuff like that. But, we're very, very meticulous, I guess, in the way that we do it. So, we have a process. We have all the room. So we have a freezer that we're very good friends with. We have a second fridge, all that sort of stuff. So everything's refrigerated and
So part of the upfront cost. So we talked about the minces and the refrigeration and the firearms.
The firearms, So once we were all set up, it was, aside from the fuel and the little bit of food that we used to eat, that we eat when we go out, it's the cost of the bullet.
And how much does a bullet cost? I feel like I'm in these stories about communist China where the families had to pay for bullets, but how much does a bullet cost?
No more than $2.
No more than $2. And how large is an average deer?
Depending on the species. So the ones that we harvest a lot are fallow. In Australia, you have hog deer, which are only in one part of Australia down near Victoria, in Victoria. Fallow, they're all over Australia. Red, sambar, rusa, and chittle. And the sizes vary. So the fallow is the one that we harvest the most. The size depends on the sex of the animal. So a doe, a female, is a decent size, 50 to 70 kilos. A buck is, depending on the age of it as well, will be anywhere from 50 to 80. You're heading into your larger species like your reds and your sambas. They're the ones that you'll see more predominantly in Victoria and in snowies as well. They're much bigger. A decent size buck would be the size of a small horse.
Wow, so that's going to fill up your freezer for some time.
It can do, yes. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. If you're eating it all the time though, we will get 10 kilos of sausages, 10 to 15 kilos of sausages out of one animal. That's pretty good.
Yeah, well, I don't get that from my hobbies, that's for sure. How safe is it when you're out and about? Where you go hunting, is it filled with lots of other hunters? Like, how do you make sure that you maintain your own safety?
Yeah, so there's a booking system for public land. So you book in and the numbers are capped. When we go out, safety is everything. So we wear blaze orange attire, some form of it. So my husband and I have blaze orange backpacks that we wear, and we also wear blaze orange caps as well because they stand out. Deer can't see the blaze orange because of the colour spectrum, but for humans, we can. So that allows us to stand out to anyone else that may be near us. However, we're talking kilometres, like the spaces that we're actually hunting are huge. I'm yet to go out and see another hunter apart from my husband when we've been out.
And you're often in areas that are a little bit not in your suburban shopping centre, shall we say. Is it hard to get what you've harvested back?
It can be very challenging. Yes. So there is an element of fitness that you should have about you. In fact, I'm really proud of myself because one of the things that I've looked at in a different way this year is all about retrieval equipment. As a female, I have always had to work smarter rather than harder as a hunter. Anything that I can do to help myself, I'm going to do it. Retrieving a deer is probably one of the hardest things to do. Actually, harvesting the animal is the easy part. Afterwards is when the hard work starts. I spent $10 on a snow sled this week, and I'm going to try that as my new piece of retrieval equipment for getting the deer out once I've harvested it. So we'll see how that goes. Fabulous. And if it works, best $10 I've ever spent.
Are you expecting it to be snowy where you are, or it'll work on any terrain?
No, I reckon it'll work on any terrain because it's plastic and it's rated to 80 kilos. Just have to figure out how to secure the animal to the sled so it doesn't move around too much, and then use the rope to drag it out. So I'll have to update you on that one.
So you're hunting animals that are a feral species. What other ethical considerations do you take into? Do you abide by?
Yeah, of course. So shot placement is everything. There is an ideal spot or zone on the animal where you want to actually hit to ensure that they're taken quickly. The other thing is, which we were talking about before we started, was my husband and I don't hunt between late November to around about mid-February because, as I said before, does are constantly cycling and they drop their fawns anywhere from around about the end of November through to about early to mid-January. The fawns are wholly and solely reliant on the does for up to 6-7 weeks of age. It's natural for the does to bed down the fawns and go and feed themselves and then come back to their fawns. So if we're out hunting and we see a doe, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to see the fawn in order to make that educated decision on whether or not she has one. We don't go out, we don't harvest over that time, because if a doe was to be harvested and it did have a young fawn at foot, then that fawn would starve to death.
Wow, they're that reliant on their mothers when they're that young.
Absolutely.
Just like human babies, I guess.
Absolutely. Just like us.
In addition to deers, what else do you hunt? Now, disclaimer here, I've seen tantalising photos of Kentucky Fried Rabbit.
Yes. In terms of human consumption, deer, rabbit and goat, there are other feral animals that we do help with controlling, and that's foxes, feral dogs, feral cats, and pigs. We don't do things like the pig shooters do, as in with the dogs and all that sort of stuff. However, if we see them and a landholder has told us that they want them gone, then we take them as well.
And the feral pigs, are they aggressive?
Yes. Yes, they're awful.
So if you see one
like them
coming
all.
at you, you're not going to go, oh, no, you're not a deer. You're just, it's a survival thing a bit.
It all depends on the time of the year as well. So, yeah, they can get a little bit territorial, but yeah, they're exceptionally destructive. So a lot of the landholders want them gone.
Yeah, I can imagine when they've got other uses for the land. The rabbits, I mean, I don't know where Australia would have been in the Great Depression, but for the rabbits.
Yeah. Look, it's a very versatile meat, actually. It's a lot like chicken, which pretty much anything you can do with chicken, you could potentially do with rabbit with some modifications. Yeah, it's not that bad a meat. We tend to give the rabbits, if we're not going to eat the rabbits ourselves, we give them to our dogs. So,
and they like the rabbit carcasses?
Oh, they love it. They absolutely love it. Yeah. And it's good for them. It's really good for their teeth and all that sort of stuff as well. Yeah. Anything that we get, all gets used.
So is there a problem with some rabbits which have been deliberately diseased as part of control? Is there some problems with eating them? How do you know if a rabbit you've harvested is safe to eat or not?
Look, you can generally tell, I don't want to make it sound too gross. You can generally tell when you open them up if they've got worms or anything like that. But some of them you do have to dispose of thoughtfully in terms of if they're all myxomatose, like if they're all gungy and stuff like that. I mean, I wouldn't eat them, but I would give them to my dogs.
So you can tell visibly they'll look a bit.
They'll look sick. They'll look really, really unwell. Yeah. One of the things that we are very mindful of is 1080. Have you heard of 1080?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, so that's it's a bait that they use, and it's used in public land for managing feral species like dogs and foxes. They're looking to use them on deer as well. However, the active ingredient in it causes the nervous system to fire off, and it stops the receptors within the body as well, like the energy receptors. Basically, the animal goes into spasms and dies of exhaustion. In layman's terms, my husband's much better at talking to what it does from a scientific perspective. Yeah, it's awful stuff. And once it's ingested, there is no turning back.
And so do you have to be careful then if you're ingesting something that's died of that?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I discovered this week that there was a man back in the 1960s that actually died from the jam that he had eaten, and it had the same stuff in it.
Wow.
Yeah.
But obviously if you've got you've registered to go into a certain area, you know that area doesn't use it.
Yeah. As an example, over in New South Wales, we can take our dogs with us hunting. So we do have two. They're part of the HPR family, which is Hunt Point Retrieve. So they're Hungarian Vizslas. And this is what they were historically bred for and used for, was for the hunt. And they indicate where there's game, and then they assist us with the retrieval process in terms of when a deer is shot. They can sometimes go into what's called a dead run, and it's where they're dead, but their body takes over, and they run, and they can run anywhere from 50 to 100 metres, which can sometimes make it a bit of a challenge to locate them, and that's where the dogs become useful in that they can actually follow the blood trail and the scent of the animal to locate it for us so that we can then retrieve it.
Wow, and I bet they love the hunting trips.
They do, yes. We have one that's more experienced and one that's still learning the ropes. Yeah, but it's really cool to watch them.
So I have one final question for you. We've been talking about how frugal, in a sense, venison can be, noting some of the startup costs there. But do you have another frugalista tip to share? Something you do to save money?
Oh, look, I really dislike waste. So whenever I do something, I look at it in terms of what can I do with this? So I cook as much as I possibly can from scratch. So convenience foods don't feature in our kitchen. And when they do, they're for a specific purpose. So as an example, I cook up venison mince. We'll have spaghetti bolognese one night with it, and then if there's any left over, that'll get turned into a lasagna or something like that. Do things from scratch. That's my advice to people. I make my own pasta.
Yum.
I make my own pasta. We process our own meat. All of our scraps, we have chickens, go to our chickens because it feeds them and then they give us eggs. And then the eggs get crushed up and they get given back to them as well. Anything that can be recycled and reused, that's exactly what we do. We try to stretch it as far as we possibly can. And it's amazing how much we have saved simply by taking things as far as we possibly can and doing things ourselves.
Wow, there's some great tips there. You're living the dream. You're hunting your own meat.
Yeah.
You're using it to make everything from venison sausages to spag bowl to backstrap and sous vide. The whole works. And so if people are interested, where can they go? They can go to the Deer Hunting Association in their local area?
Yeah, so Australian Deer Association, there are local branches all over Australia. And the local one here is ACT and Snowy Mountains branch. We meet every second month at the Harmony German Club. It's a Thursday night, third Thursday every second month. We are family orientated as well. Members turn up before the meeting to have dinner, have a bit of conversation, catch up with other members, and then the meeting kicks off at 7:30. I also encourage people to try before you buy. Tap into that curiosity, come along, check us out, and if you like what you see and hear, then please consider joining up. And the other thing is you don't have to be a hunter in order to join. If you support what we do, then our arms are open because we need supporters as well to keep us going.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate you being my guest tonight.
Thanks,
if you've
Serina.
enjoyed this podcast, make sure to like it and also join in conversations on the Joyful Frugalista Facebook group. Thank you.
You've been listening to The Joyful Frugalista with Serina Bird. And of course, sound has been by Neil Hadley.
You could talk, and I would listen, I would understand your mind. Oh, I long to be with you, walking toward the sea, and the times when I'm lonely, you could be the one to comfort me every day. I am thankful that our separate paths have crossed. Every night I lay my head down, I know I'll never feel so lost. want to